So the focus of this session is going to be that whatever advice or whatever tips we are learning today, it should be actionable, it should be tested, and it should be practical. Okay, so you can actually apply this when you're done with this session. And to make that possible, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about real world examples. And we are also going to be looking at system design, not in terms of the theoretical aspect, like you have a large distributed system, how do I vertically scale or horizontally scale? That's not really very practical for a hackathon. Instead, we're going to say that when we have to code something quickly or when we have to make something quickly, how do we go about doing these things? That is the agenda. About me, I am currently working at Interview Ready, which is a company started by a guy named Gaurav Sen. Gaurav Sen also has some YouTube subscribers. I think 326 people have followed his prank channel, which also talks about system design sometimes. And yeah, okay, let's start with the session. So the first question that I very often get in a hackathon is, which database should I choose? So the reason why this is the first question is because a lot of people start with their ER diagrams when they're thinking about starting with a project, and which is perfectly fine. But when you're saying what database should I choose, what they're talking about is, should I go for a NoSQL database? Should I go for a SQL database? Should I go for a graph database? And the advice that I'd like to give you here is that don't focus on what type of database it is. Focus on what you can do with it. So the APIs for you is more important than the internals of the database. You don't care if it is being stored as a document. You don't care if it's being stored as a relational thing, as a graph or whatever. What you are more focused on is that, does it do what you need? Okay, so for example, if you need key values and you see that Cassandra is a really good key value database, well, maybe you don't need that also. Maybe you can just do with Redis, okay, simple key value pairs. So the focus in this case is not going to be thinking about scale or thinking about how many reads or writes I need. It's going to be, how can I do something quickly? So API is more important than internals. Should I go for NoSQL or SQL? Even then, people have that question. I would say NoSQL in a hackathon because the schema is very flexible and you don't need to take care of cost in a hackathon at all, almost. But if you're talking about in general, like large scale distributed systems, usually I say, okay, fine, go with SQL in the start because you're paying out of your pocket, right? In a hackathon, the project is so small that you don't need to pay anything. But when you're starting with your startup, start with SQL and then see if NoSQL really comes up a little later on. I know that the schema is flexible in NoSQL, but still, I would suggest this. And the other thing, like after this, the very next thing is that a lot of people, when they draw these ER diagrams or even they draw service diagrams in a hackathon, they put a lot of constraints on what they're building, even before they have the requirements figured out properly. So for example, they'll say that a person who has worked in the electronics department cannot go for a practical for a computer science student. Okay, so maybe that is a attendance project that you're working on. And the way they make this work is by putting some database constraint. Okay, so they'll put some trigger or they'll say some integrity check, some foreign key. My advice would be, don't go for integrity checks. Don't hard code, or rather don't constrain yourself much in a hackathon. You want it to be as flexible as possible. When you want to add these constraints, add it in software. Don't add it in hardware, or rather don't add it in the backend. Backend is as good as hardware for us sometimes as software engineers, but yeah. The other thing I would say when you're choosing a database is, how do you scale? So should you even take care of scale? So when you're talking to the judges at the end of a hackathon, they do say that, how are you going to scale this and how are you going to make this work for a large number of users? Well, usually horizontal scaling works. If not, then you can mention what would be the best theoretical database for this use case. You can say that, okay, at the point I use NoSQL, but maybe there's a lot of relational queries that I'm making later on. And I think the best database will be MySQL, or I can go for Postgres, or something like that. Okay, so scale for us is very theoretical. Instead of actually thinking about what would be the best solution, you think about what would be the best solution in future. I'll give an example. Let's say you're making a project for Aadhaar. 1 billion users, that's a lot of people. At the very start, you have to start thinking about scale, okay, in the hackathon. On the other hand, if you're making attendance management system, what scale? 50 people, right, in the start. So don't worry about scale in the start. And so the first chain of advice when you're choosing a DB or choosing any kind of technology, actually, focus on the APIs instead of the internals. When it comes to databases, caching, any service, any library you're using, focus on the APIs instead of the internals in a hackathon. Second thing is scaling can be handled later. First, you need to make the product work. Then you can think about scaling. And finally, avoid constraints. It's not necessarily integrity constraints. The more constraints you apply, the tougher it is for you to move forward in a project. In a hackathon, you need to keep things flexible. Okay. At this point, guys, do you have any doubts? Okay, I'll just have a look at the chat at the moment. Thanks, guys. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, there's a lot of positive feedback. Okay. Awesome. So let's head to the next bit of this session, which is okay. I'll let you guess this topic. So you're seeing a graph of price versus time. This is a stock price. So if you invest in stocks, you'll know that there's lots of graphs that you can draw. But there's one stock that we are interested in. Okay, it's our companies. So what happens in the stock price is before you go public, before you go to the market, you start assuming a stock price. So for example, if you take your valuation and you say, I have $1 billion, and you say in the market, I want to put out 1 million shares. So the average price of a share will be $1,000. Okay, so you're just taking your total valuation divided by the number of shares you want to put outside. So number of shares is up to you, but total valuation, the thing is, if it's up to me, I'll say I'm worth $10 billion, $50 billion. Like I'm going to put my valuation very high. So I can't do this myself for myself. I need to hire a third party, which is called an investment bank. You might know about Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley, quite a few investment banks exist. I'm not too sure about Deutsche Bank actually, but Goldman Sachs, yeah, and Morgan Stanley, and a lot of investment banks exist, which do one thing. They come to you and they value you. They give you a value. And then they say, okay, if you're putting these many shares outside, this is the valuation we'll give. So they are professionals at it. Now there's something called a IPO, where you go to the public for the first time and you say that I want to sell my shares. So the valuation is set by the investment bank, and this is what happened. Initially, you're seeing the dotted line, which is valuation price. That was higher than the price at which people were trading the shares. Okay, so basically the public does not believe that the valuation is this high. So the public believes that the investment bank got it wrong, which means that your company is really not that good. The investment bank is saying it is very good. So at this point, the investment bank comes and says, listen, I believe you are worth $40. People are selling you at $35. They are making a mistake. I will put myself at risk and buy your shares to increase the price to $40. Right? I'm putting my money behind what I'm saying. So they buy till the point that it hits the valuation price. And that's what happened. They send the order of buy. Boom. There's a huge spike over here. You went way ahead of your valuation price. And now you're scared, okay, as the investment bank. So you bought some shares, you wanted to buy some, but instead there's been a massive hit. What then happened is you sold some shares. The whole market saw that this share is unreliable. Like it goes up, goes down. Who knows what's going to go on? Let's sell. So the share price crashed and then it became stable. Now the problem here is that the blue bit can't be avoided. The market will lose trust if your share is fluctuating much. The problem is the red bit. What do you think went wrong here? When the investment bank said, please buy some shares to the stock exchange, what could have possibly gone wrong for it to boost up so fast? So I'll give you guys 1 minute to think over this. You think over this. What could possibly go wrong when you're trying to buy shares? Samit Chaudhary has a good, actually that might have been one of the things, fear of missing out. Okay, that's a good psychological evaluation of the situation. But there was also, apart from this, there was another technical thing. So Samit Chaudhary, you're right. All of the red is not because of a technical mistake. Some of the red is because of a technical mistake. After that, everyone got scared, like, oh wow, this share is really good, we should go ahead and buy it. And it became a kind of a trend that everyone wants to buy this share before it becomes something like IRCTC or something. Okay, overhype, intrinsic value. Shashwat, you are right, it could be intrinsic value, but it was actually bumped up by the investment bank, right? So yeah, Mandava, it is a bubble. No guarantees of profits. Okay, these are all good points, but there is a technical reason why this has happened. Okay, I'll give you guys another minute. Think about what could possibly go wrong when you send a message in a distributed system. Yes, Mandava has you're very close to it. Double delivery. Yeah, very close. Consistency. Actually, in this particular case, no. But it could have been. I mean, it could have been a bug. But so then, when you're sending a message to the National Stock Exchange, you can assume them to be consistent. You can assume their systems to be reliable. And let's assume that the investment bank also had some reliable database. Okay, although that's not a good assumption. As you see, there might be mistakes. Okay, 1 minute up. I'll tell you the answer. It is double delivery, but not exactly double delivery also. So what happened is, when the bank said buy some shares, you said buy 50 shares. Okay, and you send a request. In TCP, what happens is you send a request and you get an acknowledgement. But if you don't get an acknowledgement, what do? You retry. And they retried 50 times. The share price was going like this, went like this. And then everyone saw it like climbing like a rocket, and everyone started buying the shares, and it became like a really, really hyped share. After which, when they started selling quickly, people lost trust. But the biggest problem was that there was no, not even rate limiting. There was no idempotency. Like, you send the same request once and you keep trying it again and again, but the stock exchange is thinking these are new requests. Yeah, I'll buy more shares for you. Okay, so that is the problem. A lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of people lost their jobs also because of this TCP bug that they didn't look into. So what is the real reason? Okay, yeah, TCP, there was an issue in the way that we handled it, but in the report which came out later on, there were a few things that they said. One was that the last mile transaction, just before you make the purchase, you should validate it. That has it happened 10 seconds before. Another thing is you should trigger alerts whenever there is quick buying of too many shares. There should have been exponential back off. Retry after 1 second, retry after 2, retry after 4, 8, so on and so forth. And then after 5 retries, you stop. Okay. But the most important thing was testing. Production testing should have been done about this system. It wasn't. And guess what? A lot of people had to suffer. But the reason I gave you this long ass story is because I truly believe testing is the cheapest way to write software. It saves time eventually. It avoids a lot of manual effort. Every time you change code, you don't have to go through the same scenarios. You press a button and all of the green tests work, or there is a red test and you fix that. It builds confidence in your system. You can ship your system with much more confidence. In a hackathon, all this stuff is still relevant. It does save your time in a hackathon. When all of your tests pass, right, just before that last change that you made before the presentation, it makes a big difference. You go confidently and you're not thinking in the back of your head that please chal ja, please chal ja. That thing doesn't exist when you write tests to some extent. Okay, the bug scope also reduces. You know that this part is perfectly tested. The bug can only exist in these parts which are dark. There is no light there. If there is test, then there is like a like a street light. It lights up the whole place. Okay, and some people use this for documenting expectations. I don't use it for documenting code, but okay, up to you. First 3 points are the most important. Okay. Guys, do you have any doubts up till this point? Then we'll go to the next part. Okay, we have Abel Matthew saying, what if because of idempotency we can get 2 pizzas from Zomato instead of 1? Get 2 pizzas from Zomato instead of 1. Well, in Zomato, it is possible, yeah. No, but if you have idempotency, it will not happen. If you have request retries, it can happen. Idempotency means that if you send the same request, then the request is ignored. You get a success response that, yeah, I got your order. So let's take an example. You're ordering a pizza. You go to the pizza shop and you say, please take my order. They say yes. But you couldn't hear their yes. So you say, please take my pizza. And then what they do is they say, oh, this person has already ordered from a pizza. So they don't do anything. They just respond with a yes. They don't note it down in the log. So that's how you ensure idempotency. The client is unaware that the server is not repeating the processing. Okay. So you won't get 2 pizzas, then you'll get 1 pizza. The only time you'll get 2 pizzas is if I, as a server, don't have idempotency. I say, yeah, every time you send me a new request, like the National Stock Exchange, you can't blame them also if they start taking care of everybody's IDs and start looking at, has this request come to me already? Then there'll be too much load. So they say, you take care of it. I am going to always accept a new order. Okay, Mandava, yeah, that is correct. Rishi, is this for first year BTech students of NIT Roorkela? Well, maybe 3rd and 4th year would be better off with these concepts. First year, you're mainly learning about coding and stuff. So I would say if you're in 1st or 2nd year, maybe you can check out the free content on the YouTube channel on system design before you come here. This is a little more advanced than that. Okay, Astha just made it clear. Okay, for really short hackathon timing, is testing an overkill? So Vedant Raghuvanshi, no. For computer programming, yeah. If it's a 2-hour thing, like there's no time for testing. Somebody else gives you the test and you just run it, which is fine. But for a really short hackathon, I don't know how short do you mean? Like, do you mean 6 hours or 10 hours or something? Anything more than 12 hours, I think, is worth it. Definitely, testing is worth it. The problem with testing is that it looks like an investment in the start, but it saves a lot of time later on. So initially, you might feel like I can get away with it, but later on, there's nothing like testing because your code is clean, it works, and what in front of judges when it doesn't work, it's the worst feeling ever. And you can look at the guys and tell that this guy is not confident. They have been testing manually till now, which is forgivable, but yeah, like, what are you going to do? Okay, should I go with BDD or TDD? Vijay Kumar is asking, well, TDD, BDD, behavior-driven development and test-driven development. In a hackathon, I don't know how practical that is, but it is, some people are accustomed to it. If you're accustomed, yeah, go ahead with it. Okay, next topic. Observability. Observability means that you can observe the health or the behavior of your system just by looking at the numbers in your system. So for example, you look at your system and you say, okay, the amount of memory being consumed is 80%. The processing power is just 10%. And the database is being used by almost 100%. So there is a lot of storage which is being done, a lot of cache memory being used, but the processing is really low. So you're not doing any heavy kind of processing. Okay. You can think of it that way. You have a bunch of numbers which are related to your system, which describes your system, and you want that so that you can observe your system as it functions. So one common way to do this is logging. So you can log a new request which has come in. Later on in your downstream system, that will be picked up and said 1 request added. So today, how many requests did I serve? 500. Okay. Yesterday I served 400. So my number of requests is increasing. Now, what people do very often with logging is that they log optimistically. So they think that maybe this should not happen, so they don't log the ID of the request, or they don't log enough information over there. So my personal advice to you would be to log pessimistically in any system. Assume that that part can fail, or if there is any failure, then you want relevant context over there. Okay, so that's point number one. Do more logs than you think are needed. Point number two is the exact opposite of that. Logging is not a substitute for testing. You cannot think that if this code doesn't run, then I'll look at the logs and debug it. Okay, so don't prepare yourself for debugging through logging. Rather, make sure you don't need to debug much through testing. So once you have tested that bit of code, now you will not feel like putting the log yourself. So that's the place where you save on a lot of logs. So that's one point against logging much. The other point, please do log a lot. Third point is do not log large objects. If you have a request object which has like 50 fields in it, and on every request you log on every request acceptance, logging the entire object is fine. But inside also, if you're logging the whole object, okay, it has a hash map inside it with all the key value pairs, it's going to eat up all of your space. While you're debugging, you don't want to see your log lines like huge log lines with irrelevant information and you hunting for information over there. Much better would be just to log the relevant things in that large object. For example, the ID and maybe one or two fields which are very common. The user ID, if you're giving some sort of orders, then order ID. Yeah, request ID, order ID, user ID, that's enough information. And later on you can, change that, especially in the internal code. The fourth point is an opposite of the third one, log with context. So don't log large objects without reason. But when you're logging, be sure to give the appropriate amount of information, right? If you don't have the order ID or if you don't have the request ID, you'll never know where the request went in the code. It gets lost in code. So these are the 4 points when it comes to observability, to debug, to make sure that your system is healthy, to find metrics in it, make sure that you're logging well. And these 4 points will help you. Log pessimistically. Don't substitute logging for testing. Don't log large objects, and log with context. Okay, there is Abel Matthew who's asking, does logging slow a system? If a function is called multiple times and it has a log operation, then does that IO operation slow it down? Yeah, logging a lot does slow down your system. There are many tricks which have been found to make logging blazing fast. Okay, first of all, you don't need an IO operation in a log also. Sometimes what you're doing is you're just writing to a data structure in memory only. So you're writing to the queue, and logs are then patched up and then flushed into a file. That's one way to speed up logging. There are some other tricks also to speed up logging. For example, you can make it asynchronous. So all log lines are ordered, but the log is, you ask the guy, go ahead and write the log while you continue processing. So it's asynchronous that way. And there are other neat tricks also being used, especially in a popular logging library. You'll see a lot of these tricks being used. Okay, cool. Any other question, guys? I'll take this for another minute, and I'll also close this door, which is creating a lot of noise. Much better, I think. Okay, that's good. We now know about observability. Oh, okay. We can conclude. That's amazing. So, like I said, guys, if you want to have like the basics of system design, you can head over to the YouTube channel, because this is for, I'd say, third or fourth year students. But if I want to summarize this in 3 points, quick points, actionable, tested, and practical, then A, choose technologies which work for you. So don't care so much about what is the internals, care about what it does for you. What are the APIs? Point number 2 is test your code as much as possible. It is an investment which gives very good returns, unlike certain stocks. Okay. Point number 3 is for observability. You need to log and log with some principles. Make sure you're not substituting logging for testing, which is the most common mistake I have seen. And make sure you're not logging large objects, which is another common mistake I have seen. If you log large objects, you won't be able to debug fast. It's going to waste your time in the hackathon. Not a great idea. Okay, yeah, that would be the summary of this talk. And if you have any questions, you can now ask me in the chat. Okay, Sayan has the first question. What logging practice is suggested to find out server crash reasons? If a server's crashed, like if the service has crashed or the server has crashed. If the server has crashed, I'm assuming there is some sort of hardware thing over here. In which case it will be difficult to say. You need a health check service, which makes sure that it pings the box and says, "Are you alive?" And then every 5 seconds it keeps asking the same question, "Are you alive?" And if someone says no, which is never going to happen, so you have to say yes, yes, yes. The moment you don't get an answer, you assume that the person is dead, like the service is dead. So at that time, you demarcate the service, you decommission the service, or not decommission the service, you decommission that box and you add a new node with that code running. So it's like a new node with that service. If you're talking about service crash, that is also very similar. Usually you get a nice stack trace. So if you're running it on Java, you will get a stack trace of why it crashed. If you're running it on Golang, then there are ways to get to the stack trace. Yeah, that's a compiler thing though. And if you want it in the log file, then yeah, your DevOps team can do that. They can give it a syserror pipeline. Vedant is asking, can things like Redis queue be used for logging? Well, if you want to publish all of your logs in one place, like in an Elasticsearch, maybe you want to search them later on, and you want to post them, yeah, you're probably going to be using queues to send logs. Kafka is one. You can have, I think SQS will also work here. I'm not aware of Redis queues, but the architecture seems similar. Like what you're mentioning is using queues for logging. That does happen, yes. But I'm not aware of Redis queues, so I can't say yes in this particular case. Devansh is asking, what are the prerequisites for your system design interview ready course? My YouTube channel has all of the content which I would consider to be prerequisites. Well, if you can code, okay, using one language, one programming language, and you have worked on one project in your life, that's when I would say, yeah, you should watch my system design playlist on YouTube. Once you go through that, I think you're prepared to go for the interview ready course. Now, if you're in college, would you like to invest in that? Yeah, nowadays some system design questions are asked, but my YouTube channel content is enough, I think. Easily. Okay, but if you're working or you're an intern, yeah, if you want to invest in yourself, personally, I found it the best way to invest in the best investment you can make is yourself. So spending money on myself has always been a good idea for me. So yeah, if you're earning, then yeah, you can go ahead. Mandava is asking, Gaurav Sen, is system design required in hackathons only when hack is done on big systems, such as when I want to enhance a feature in Google search or WeChat? Like I said, system design is multiple things. If you're talking about specifically how do I scale the system, three core ones to be this: logging, testing, and choosing technologies. But yeah, if it's a very long hackathon, like a 30-day hackathon or something, more and more of the system design concepts start making sense here. Okay, Smarak Das is asking, should UI testing be a part of test-driven development? 1 second, I'll just stop sharing the screen. Okay. Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice if UI testing is part of test-driven development. I'm not very sure if UI testing is easy now. Earlier, it used to be very hard. Like having an automated thing, a script through Selenium usually people used to do it through that. You would go and click a button, and then you would go over here and type in an answer and all that. As a backend engineer, I would say testing is super important. As a front-end engineer, also it's super important. But in a hackathon, can you plug in all those systems together? I'm not aware. If you can, it is worth it. If you can't, well, you don't have a choice, do you? Okay, guys, I'll take questions for the next 5 minutes. So up till 6:40, that's actually 6 minutes. Yeah. Should you add, okay, no, is system design principles same for every system or the app we built? Like, so Khushbu Gupta is asking, is it the same? Are the system design principles same for every system? Yeah, see, system design is not really so much about principles than it is about trade-offs. So in a gaming system, you might say performance is super important, but maybe consistency is not that important. Like, for example, let's take Facebook. You have a person going over there and clicking a button. Okay, they clicked on a like button. They hit refresh and they see that the like is still not clicked. Now, will they get super angry about it? Not really. I mean, who really cares about if it is 307 likes versus 308 likes? Okay, so that place you say consistency is not so important. Availability is pretty important. In a bank, what if you go over there and you transfer 10,000 rupees and then you see that the 10,000 rupees is still in your account and the other guy is still not seeing it? So over there, yeah, your priorities are changing. So the trade-offs are very important to be noted and like it written down in a system design document. It's often done. Abel Matthew, hey Gaurav, any Jugaad idea for hackathon, as hackathon is all about Jugaads? Okay, I'll give you guys some advice on hackathon ideas because there's a lot of ideas I see and I get like excited looking at them and happy looking at them, but I also feel bad when this happens. A lot of people have good ideas, but they don't think about how do they make that idea sustainable. Okay, when I say sustainable, it means that you have to be able to do it day in, day out for the next 5 years. How does that happen? Well, you cannot overwork people, point number one. And the other one is that you have to make it profitable. Okay, very, very important. A lot of people come forward and they say, this is there to help other people. This is there through government donations or government contracts we are going to run. Well, dude, getting donations is not easy. Okay, or you know, I mean, I said dude, I should have said, well, guy or girl. Getting donations is not easy. And really, the easiest way to get money is to give people value so much that they feel like willingly doing a transaction with you. So they believe that the value that they're getting is more than the money that they're paying you. And you are happy because you're getting more money than your production cost. Think of it that way. Society progresses through that, through transactions, through money exchange, which is profitable for both parties. You don't need to scam anybody to make money. Okay, and in a hackathon, very often what happens is people come up with free ideas, which are often not sustainable. So focus on sustainability. You can take that idea and then make a lot of positive impact in society that way. Okay. I think Aryaman, who's a good friend of mine, had once mentioned that you don't need to be saving injured puppies. Your idea doesn't need to be that for it to be worth putting out in society. There are many small problems out there. Many families are losing time not being able to see their mom or dad because they're working so long. So if you reduce the work time also, that's a big good thing that you're doing to society. And if you charge them money for it, yeah, why not? Okay, I think I've spoken enough about that. Think we are on the last question. Bank of Scotland uses MongoDB, NoSQL. Okay, yeah, Devansh had asked this question. So does every banking system use SQL only? No, no. So a bank, by the way, is a huge system. So it's a huge distributed system. Analytics is being done on NoSQL. A lot of social analytics is being done on GraphDBs. This type of processing is happening on MySQL. This type of processing is happening on Redis. So it's a big system. In some places, you can't even afford to go to the database. You have to serve from memory. So over there, you have an in-memory cache. Sometimes you say, okay, the global cache is okay, but it has to be in the same country. It has to be in the same city. So over there, you use different technologies. Then comes the thing like, this is just an auditing thing. Later on, the government will come and look at this 7 years later, any random check mein aa jayega. So over there, you use a file system or a really slow, storage thing, which is cheap. It's cheap because it's so slow. So there's no such thing that a banking system is going to do this. It's more like a bank is a big thing, and if you're talking about transactions, yeah, usually it is SQL. So after that long answer, I came to usually bank transactions are SQL. Yeah, okay. Okay, guys, I think we're done. Yeah, I think we are done with the questions. If you have any more questions, you can post them right now, or I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. Really nice session, Gaurav. All of us enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah. I don't think you have a lot of time to take questions. So I would ask you, in case you have questions, you can ask him on LinkedIn or somewhere. He would be more than happy to help you out. Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask me on LinkedIn, even on Twitter, I'm there. Yeah, or there is GKCS at scalability.tech. If you have a big
Yep.
doubt, like you have a big PDF or something,
Yeah.
I might not answer this fast.
There's a person who wants to come up to stage probably and talk to you. Are we up for it, Gaurav?
Yes. Does he have a gun? Then keep him.
I'm giving him a mic. Hi, Alistair. Alistair, am I audible? Oh, you are, Alistair, you are given a mic. You can speak up. You raised hand, so. Oh, okay.
His mic is not
technical
working.
Glitch.
Yeah. Alistair, nice DP. Like, where did you find it, by the way? Okay. Alistair, there's nothing to worry about. No pressure. There's like 75 people waiting on you, but don't worry. Are your hands shaking yet?
It happens. Technical glitch. Online see. It's more like a scenario when teachers asks your roll number. At the present moment of the attendance, you're not there.
Yeah. Or your friend doesn't know how to sign your proxy. I don't know if you guys still have that. No.
That used to happen in offline classes, but online has made it a bit tough.
Too bad. Those are the days. Okay, Mandava has a link for NoSQL database for digital banking applications. It's interesting. Raymond DB, yeah. I hope you're not working for them, Mandava, but he's working in Amazon. Okay. Vedant is surviving through proxies. I'd like to speak to his teachers once, if you guys don't mind. No, about nothing. No, just general things. He's the host, by the way. Oh, too bad. Okay, Jay Pathak is asking what to focus on most as a first-time student. I think just survive. Yeah, just
First year is basically to enjoy, as in after engineering the entire entrance process and everything, just to enjoy the first year.
yeah, as long as you don't get so many KTs that you go like, oh no, I can't survive the rest of engineering. So that's the reason I was like, yeah, you're right, enjoy, but survive also. Just
yeah, I don't think Alistair will be there with a question.
Alistair, if you want, you can type out your question.
Type out the question, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry, Alistair. I'll never forgive you for this, but don't worry about it. I'll find you. I'll find whichever company you're working for, and then ...
I think we are done with the questions.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. Now it's just general chit chat.
Let's give Alistair one more minute. He's the guy. I mean, 6:45 is a good time. It's an auspicious time.
Okay, there are a few questions. Gaurav,
yes.
If you can ask.
What are languages to start if first time like Jaideep, like I said, survive. Yeah, I think you'll love it. After 2 semesters, you'll be like, what should I do in software engineering instead of AI ML? Okay, but what languages to start with? Yeah, start with Python. Knowing about it is not going to harm you. DevOps uses it. Everyone uses Python sometime or the other in their life. Mandava is asking, Gaurav, in your YouTube videos, you told applications having a huge scale are using SQL. So how do they do it? Well, SQL is also very scalable. The only thing is when you have a tremendous amount of read and writes, that's the time when you say, okay, fine, how do I make this even faster? So the thing about NoSQL is joins are not allowed. So they can do a little more optimization. They can dump data and they're also denormalized usually. While in SQL, you expect the schema to be normalized, and when you're writing and reading, there might be locks that you're taking. So there's a few scenarios that SQL tables take care of, which may or may not be necessary in our case. So that's when we say that, okay, the scale to scale, we have to go for NoSQL. But otherwise, they are very scalable. Like you take Postgres or take Oracle, put some powerful computers, and you run the DB, it's going to work. Okay.
There's a hey from Alistair. So are we expecting a question? Yes, maybe. But we don't have time.
Okay. Yeah, there's one question I'll take, Alistair, just for you. We are all stalling on you. Okay. Is it a good idea to start with NoSQL for starting on a small app and then switch to a SQL DB later on? No, I would, Ang Mei from Shaolin Temple, you're an airbender. Okay, that's really nice. I would suggest the opposite. Start with SQL, and later on, it's actually SQL is a little cheaper usually as a solution by a lot of cloud solution providers. Take Amazon, take Google. But you start with SQL and then you head towards NoSQL. Okay, guys. Yeah, I think poor guy. Mic didn't work in the last moment. Too bad.
Yeah.
But
he has raised his hand.
You can contact me on LinkedIn or
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll for people in the Discord server, I would give the link for Gaurav Sen's LinkedIn. Else, it's quite easily searchable and popular, so that won't be a case for you, like a hard time for you to find him out. So yes, it was a great session, Gaurav. We'll end the session soon. For people just a quick announcement for people out there. We have this leaderboard thing that we have already told you several times, and the code and the Typeform link will be soon out in the chat. It would be there on the Discord server as well. So keep a note of it, and that would be this for this session. Thank you, Gaurav, for this.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See ya.